You know, there's a silent, invisible war being fought all around us every single day. It's a war for truth, for who we are, and for the very idea of what's real. And in this explainer, we're going to dive deep into its weapons, its history, and your place on this new kind of battlefield.
I mean, this is the question of our time, isn't it? Every time you log into something or see a video online, you're trusting a system. But what is that trust really built on? In a world where deep fakes and misinformation are just a click away, how do we actually verify, well, anything?
So what's really wild is that our biggest vulnerability today, the human element in cybersecurity, which you see on the left, it has this deep, deep echo in the past. On the right, we've got this concept of moral injury. The same kind of psychological pressure and enforced silence that created that historical wound, it's mirrored in the social engineering attacks we see all the time now. It just goes to show the weakest link has always been, well, us.
Okay, so to find the blueprint for a truly secure system, our investigation doesn't start with silicon chips or algorithms. Nope, it starts with a language. We're actually heading back to World War II to uncover the incredible story of the Navajo Code Talkers.
First things first, we've got to get a huge distinction straight. What the Navajo created was a code, not a cipher. A cipher is just math, right? It swaps letters around. Think A becomes Z, B becomes Y, a simple substitution. But a code? A code is linguistic. It replaces whole ideas with other ideas. And trust me, that difference is everything.
And this illustrates the idea perfectly. So on the left, you see how modern digital security works with what's called public key infrastructure. You can think of it like a mailbox. Anyone can drop a message in the slot, that's the public key, but only you have the private key to open it up and read the message. Now look at the right. The Navajo language worked the same way. The radio waves were public. Anyone could listen in. But the private key, it wasn't a number. It was an entire cultural context, a poetic, metaphorical way of thinking that a machine or an enemy just could not compute.
And here is the absolute gut punch of this story. The very same language that the US government systematically tried to stamp out in its boarding schools, literally beating children for speaking it, became the nation's most precious strategic secret. It turns out culture wasn't some weakness to be erased. It was the ultimate unbreakable asset.
And just look at how it worked. It's beautiful, really. A submarine becomes Bislow or Iron Fish. A dive bomber is a genie, a chicken hawk. A battleship is Leetso, a whale. You see? This isn't just translation. It's pure poetry. The enemy cryptanalysts were looking for a mathematical pattern, but they were up against a worldview. They never stood a chance.
But, and this is a huge but, this unbreakable code came at a devastating cost, a price paid in silence by the men who carried it. Now we have to look at the consequences of that silence, which were both psychological and physical.
23. Let that number just sink in for a minute. For 23 years after the war ended, the Code Talkers were sworn to absolute secrecy. They were told if they ever spoke a word of it, it was treason. An entire generation lived and died without being able to tell a single person, not their wives, not their kids, not their parents, what they really did in the war.
And this timeline, it just shows you the painful journey. During that long era of silence, they couldn't get veterans' benefits or certain jobs because their records were all classified. And get this, the secret was only declassified in 1968, not to honor them, but because new technology, computers and satellites, had made their human code obsolete. Actual national recognition? That didn't come until 2001, 56 years after the war.
So the silence itself inflicted a deep spiritual wound. You see, in Dene, or Navajo culture, warriors returning from battle have to go through a healing ceremony called the enemy way to cleanse themselves of the trauma of war. But how can you perform a healing ceremony for a war you're forbidden to even speak about? The answer is you can't, and this created what's known as a profound moral injury.
The cost wasn't just psychological, though. The same silence that hid the heroism of the Code Talkers also created a shadow where another secret could grow, one that would literally poison their land and their bodies for generations to come.
At the exact same time the Code Talkers were forced into silence, their homeland became ground zero for a massive uranium boom. To feed the atomic anxiety of the Cold War, miners, many of them Navajo, were told they were digging for freedom. All the while, the government knew about the deadly risks of radiation and said nothing.
So how in the world are these two stories, a secret language and a radioactive legacy, connected? Well, the bridge between them is pretty unexpected.
It's not found in history or culture, but in the universal language of mathematics.
So the danger of uranium waste is governed by this really precise mathematical formula for exponential decay. Its half-life is a fixed, predictable constant. It's a process that's easy to calculate going forward, but trying to reverse it or even just comprehend the timescale is nearly impossible for the human mind. It's a one-way street.
Now look at this. The heart of all modern digital security works on an almost identical principle. It's incredibly easy for a computer to multiply two huge prime numbers together, but to take that massive result and work backward to find the two original primes, that is a fantastically, mind-bogglingly hard problem. It's another one-way street.
This concept has a name, and it's a pretty cool one, a trapdoor function. It's basically the mathematical equivalent of mixing two cans of paint. It's simple to do, but completely impossible to undo unless you have a secret piece of information, a trapdoor, that makes the reverse journey trivial. This is the bedrock of pretty much all modern encryption.
Okay, so let's bring all these threads together now. The cultural shield of the Code Talkers, the permanent legacy of the uranium mines, and the universal math of trapdoor functions. They all give us clues about how we fight the silent war for our identity today.
Today, we prove something is real using a digital signature. It's a four-step dance. First, you create a unique digital fingerprint of the message. That's called a hash. Then, you use your private key to sign that hash. After that, anyone can use your public key to verify that the signature is yours and that the message hasn't been changed by so much as a comma. It is pure mathematical proof of authenticity.
And this mathematical proof becomes super important when we start talking about who owns a story. This slide shows a fundamental clash of worldviews. The Western framework often sees knowledge as individual property, protected by things like copyright. But the indigenous framework? It sees knowledge as a sacred responsibility, held in trust by the community. It's about custodianship. One is about owning property. The other is about relationships.
And this leads us directly to the modern battlefield: data sovereignty. It's the fundamental right of a people to control their own story, their own data. The fight over land and resources in the past is now also a fight for control over the information that defines who you are.
Which brings everything right back to your mission. From this whole interconnected history, you're being asked to forge the tools of modern truth. An authenticator box that uses math to prove identity, a decay report that analyzes a chemical legacy that never goes away, and a sovereignty brief that argues for the right to control your own narrative. These aren't just projects, they are the weapons of the modern warrior.
So we end where we began. In this new world, your history, your biology, your identity, it's all becoming data. And the lessons of the past, from the silence of the Code Talkers to the persistence of uranium, they force us to ask this critical question: who will you trust to be the custodian of your story?